Hello everyone. Today I'm going to tell you the story of the very first heart transplant in the world, and it all happened right here in Cape Town. I'm actually parked here at the spot where the story began. Unfortunately, our story today has a rather grim beginning. It all started when a family of four stopped off at a bakery that was built just where I'm parked right now. I'm going to flip the camera to show you what's going on here. Denise Darvel, a 25-year-old young lady, was with her family, and they stopped on that side of the road where that white car is parked. The mother and Denise got out of the car and dashed across this busy road into the bakery that was built here to pick up some yummy goodies for the weekend. Unfortunately, when they dashed back across the road, a car struck them down right there in front of that green bin, and the mother was killed instantly. Denise, unfortunately, was seriously injured and unconscious. And it was this tragic accident that set in motion an extraordinary sequence of events that culminated into one of the biggest breakthroughs in medical history. Now, please forgive me for filming this segment from the safety of the inside of my car, but walking and filming in itself is already slightly hazardous, and to do that on this very busy road where there are hundreds of taxis and trucks hurtling up and down this road, I would rather not meet the same fate as that poor girl on that day. So I decided to be responsible and do it from inside my car.
Denise and her mother were rushed to the Groote Schuur Hospital, which was less than a mile up the road. Unfortunately, she was declared brain dead upon arrival. Only those who have suffered a similar catastrophe can begin to feel what the father of Denise must have experienced. Faced with the loss of both his wife and daughter, Mr. Darvel had both the courage and the love of his fellow human beings to agree to the donation of his daughter's heart and kidneys. A second family in Cape Town was to become inextricably linked with the Darvel's tragedy. A gentleman called Mr. Louis Varskanski, who was a businessman from Seapoint who had suffered numerous heart attacks, was already in the hospital that day and was willing and brave enough to take the chance on an untried surgical treatment. The head of the cardiothoracic surgery department at Groote Schuur at the time was a young and upcoming Professor Christiaan Barnard. He rose from a Karoo farm childhood to become a highly skilled and dedicated surgeon that trained at the University of Cape Town and in Minnesota in the United States. By 1967, he had gathered together a team of gifted surgical colleagues to assist him. However, apart from the remarkable surgical abilities of Professor Barnard and his team, the skills of many other disciplines were needed, such as cardiologists, the radiologists, pathologists, immunologists, anesthetists, nurses, technologists, and the blood transfusion service. I do apologize, everybody. There's a lot of big words in today's story. These separate links in the historical chain had all been forged, and shortly after midnight on that Saturday, surgery began. Just before 6 a.m. on Sunday, 3 December 1967, a new heart in the chest of Dr. Louis Varskanski was electrically shocked into action. The first human-to-human heart transplant in the world had been performed in the Groote Schuur Hospital. And the next day, Professor Christiaan Barnard became one of the most famous people on earth. It was indeed the most publicized event in the history of humanity at the time. Remember, this was 2 years before the first moon landing. So why did the first human heart transplant lead to such media frenzy, never seen before or anticipated by Christiaan Barnard and his colleagues around the whole world? Well, for centuries, the heart had been equated with the soul of human beings. The concept was, for example, present among several pre-Columbian indigenous populations, including the Aztecs. By far, the most common form of human sacrifice in the 15th century Aztec Empire was heart extraction, which seems to have related to the Aztec belief that the heart was both the seat of the individual soul and a fragment of the sun's heat. As such, the heart transplant was perceived as the surgical equivalent of the ascent of Everest, as the Times phrased it at the time, and it could also be seen as the moon landing of the medical world. There is a fantastic museum here in the Groote Schuur Hospital dedicated to the first heart transplant. It's called the Heart of Cape Town Museum. Unfortunately, it is currently closed due to COVID, which meant I couldn't show you the museum. The museum is actually situated in the original operating theatre where the first transplant was performed. And it's got all the original equipment and is really a step back into time where you can see how it was all done. A really fascinating experience. I can highly recommend that you come and do this when you visit Cape Town. Now, I'm sure you have one question left, and that is, how long did Mr. Waskanski survive for? He lived for 18 days. Unfortunately, he passed away not due to the heart transplant failing, but because of the immune suppression drugs he was given to prevent his body from rejecting the foreign organ, and that meant that he contracted pneumonia. These drugs have become more sophisticated over time, and these days the survival rate on average for a heart transplant is anything from 5 to 20 years, depending on how old you are and all other factors considered. And here we are coming up to the new Christiaan Barnard Memorial Hospital, and specifically I want to show you one of the most captivating works of art on display in the hospital is a Marco Cianfanelli sculpture called The Threshold, which is suspended from the roof in the foyer. This imposing work of art captures the moment that Louis Waskanski's heart was removed and Professor Barnard stared into an empty, living human chest cavity. Barnard saw potential, hope, faith and perseverance. He later recalled, "At that moment, the full impact of what I was doing hit me." It was this notion that inspired Marco Cianfanelli's sculpture, an archway, the threshold where the arrangement of linear profiles represent the incremental expansion of the moment in time where the impossible suddenly becomes possible. Dr. Barnard passed away in September 2001, and one of his last interviews expressed that he had no regrets in life. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day.